Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. Multicultural Migration Observatory seminar today is moving to West Africa. And the subject of today's seminar is internal and external trajectories of Senegalese migration. It is the fourth and the last of our thematic seminars devoted to the case studies from the Future Migration Scenarios for Europe project, which is funded by the European Union Horizon 2020 program. We've started our journey through few cases since November last year. The first presentation concerned the North African case of Tunisia and Tunisian internal and external migration, with the presentation by Professor Hassan Boubakri. Then we moved to Iraq and we explored internal and external migrations in Iraq. It was a very important moment because at that time, a significant number of people emerging at the Polish-Belarusian border and trying to claim asylum at this border were persons from Iraq. So it was a very useful first-hand also information about how the situation looks like from the Iraqi perspective. In March, we were exploring the Ukrainian internal and external migration. We planned to do that yet before the invasion. The invasion totally changed the situation and the context of this presentation, but made it even more important and valid in that sense. One of the big differences was that the researchers with whom we are cooperating and who were supposed to be speaking about the Ukrainian case originally from Kiev, they were in Krakow. At least some of them were in Krakow. So this was a totally unplanned transition in a way. And the last but not least, a very important case to which today's seminar is devoted is the Senegalese migrations. Senegal has been a very important country from the perspective of migration studies. It's a country of intense internal and international migrations. It is estimated over 2.5 million Senegalese people live in diaspora, and today 41% of them, of Senegalese emigrants, are living in Europe. And this is one of many reasons we have the Senegalese case in our case studies sort of project, and the reason that we have devoted today's seminar to this case. More about the case, I will allow the speakers to say more. And before I give them the floor and the possibility to speak, I would like to ask a co-chair, Agnieszka Legut, to briefly introduce the speakers. Agnieszka, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So welcome to the seminar. I can see we have 2 speakers now here, so it's a success, almost full success. We're waiting still for Mamadou. Yes. So the speakers will be Stefano De Uberti, who's a researcher and social anthropologist at the National Research Council Institute for Research on Population and Social Policies. And the institution is located in Rome, Italy, of course. Let me welcome also Lansine Ian Diop, who's an assistant professor at the Department of Politics and Society, and your main affiliation is the Center for Comparative Welfare States, welfare states and the Center for Displacement, Migration and Integration. And we hope that also Mamadou Sall will join us, who's a professor of population studies and a director since 2017 of the Institute for Training and Research in Population Development, Health and Health Reproduction. Of course, I could continue, yes, with talking about your areas of specialization, but not to take too much time, I will just send our participants to the description of the event on Facebook, for example, and there you will be able to read more about our speakers. Okay, so without further ado, the floor is yours. I would just like to encourage anybody who's participating to ask questions on chat. Okay, and there will be an opportunity towards the end to discuss the questions you may have. Okay, so thank you and good luck.
I believe we can, good morning to everyone. I believe we can start, and I hope Mamadou will join us. Actually, he has this in between section, so I hope meanwhile he will be with us. I will leave the floor to Lancinet, that he will do the first section of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Stefano. I think you were able to change slide when maybe following my presentation, because I see you already shared the screen. And thanks. Can you see me, by the way?
Donc,
yes, okay. I just reached Mohammed and he's now here. And I don't need to introduce myself because you already did that very well, Conrad. I had a few internet issues, but now it's solved. And I would just start by actually going right into the topic because I think we're a bit late. By talking about the Senegalese case studies, but I will also brush a little bit about the film project and the case study of the origin prisons. And Senegal was one of the case studies where we actually wanted to explore the city and migration nexus in order to understand the role of urban experience in either discouraging further migration, international migration, or in a way of push, which means does it serve as a stepping stone for further migrations? Just going from rural, transitioning from rural to urban area, how does it shape future decision to migrate? And the reason why Senegal is actually interesting is that Senegal is a very particular sub-Saharan African country that is had the tradition of first a country of immigration, but it became quickly after the independence a country of immigration. And that was, if you look at, for instance, boat migration to Spain, there is a lot of boats that are actually coming from Senegal and driving to the Spanish coast. And Senegal is also like a stepping stone for some of the migrants that come from further regions, such as Guinea, and then they will stop in Senegal and then further go to Morocco or take the Libyan road or the sea for some migrants. So for sub-Saharan country, it's actually an interesting case in this regard. The city of Dakar, Stefano, can you switch, please?
Are you able to switch by yourself or not?
No, I cannot switch actually. Okay. Okay, maybe I can take the control. I will, okay, I request control, so maybe I can switch now.
Okay.
Okay. So the main research question that we asked was which local factors drive migration propensity, and how does urban experience, regardless of whether people actually are migrating or not or want to migrate, how does this urban experience shape the decision to just remain in the city because maybe they had a good experience and migrating is not maybe a need for anymore, or whether these cities kind of foster further migration, or specifically international migration or internal migration, so moving from one city to another. the relation actually between cities and migration is actually shaped with respect to development of imaginaries, projection, and trajectory, particularly when it comes to Europe. So when you live in this kind of region or countries, mainly sub-Saharan African countries, which Senegal is part of, the idea of, for instance, Europe is particularly shaped in the discourses that you hear from migrants that have returned, and that will tell you about the experience, or that they can see somebody building a building, a neighbor that is building a very nice building, and then it actually shaped the imaginary and shaped the perception about what Europe could be as a decision, as a migration option. The main argument here is that to study the urban experience, how it relates to migration, further migration, international migration, we actually want to capture the temporality. So basically, we looked at three type of profile. The newcomers, so migrants that actually just arrived in the city, how do they experience the city, and how does this short experience shape the decision to migrate? But we also look at long stayers, which means that migrants that have stayed quite. I mean, initially we had like 10 years over, and then we have between 5 and 10 years. So we have this free profile of migrants, where actually the idea is that when you have a long-term experience in the city, that actually might shape more your decision to migrate in a different way than somebody that just arrived in the city for a few months. I think I still cannot change this, Stefano. Yeah, okay, so there is, I mean, in theory, there is some kind of theory that have been done on that, related to migration decision, whether it is a more or less passive response to external factors, such as is a decision to leave a result of Stefano, okay. A result of intertwined dimensions, distinctive historical periods, contexts, and scales. And how does it interact from the local to the historical specificity? If I take the example of Senegal, for instance, there is the divide between actually some groups that are known for historically for having a propensity to migrate, where actually migration is more culturally embedded in the ethnic fabric of those groups. And I could just, Mahamadou, if he doesn't want to contradict me, he can, Mahamadou is part of that, the Pular ethnic group that is actually living also in some part of the Senegal that historically have known for actually migrating. But we didn't look only at on the aspiration capability model, but we look at also trajectory of migrations with some of the well-known authors. But the idea is to look at migration just not as a linear phenomenon where actually you think, okay, you leave the Senegal River Valley that is affected by drought, and then you go to Dakar, and then afterwards you go to France or Italy or whatever. It doesn't happen that way, because the barrier of migrations are quite pregnant, and the process of migration is fragmented and affected by spatial friction and step backs, so that actually it becomes something like you go and then you attempt, and then you're met by step back, and then it just becomes a process that is actually more like an attainable dream that rather than just a linear process. And actually, if you at least what came from our interview, I think I'm overstepping with the result, but I think it's a nice example to give that most actually people that we met, most of them didn't, that we interviewed, most of them didn't have passport, or they actually never attempted to ask for a visa, because clearly they know that actually the result would be a rejection often. So there is not a like specific of point where actually there is a decision to leave, but actually the decisions will be more like a result of fortuitous like things, like such as maybe like it's the opportunity that that just come from unexpected places. So it doesn't become something that is planned and reflected, and then there is investment. It's more often fortuitous project. Stefano, can you change, please? I would quickly, after theoretical background, I will just talk about the methodology. I think I won't insist much of it on it because actually I don't have a lot of time. But quickly, I will introduce actually some of our a little bit our interview guide. So we interviewed people actually from different neighborhoods in Dakar. And some of you that maybe know Dakar, there is a part that is quite neighborhood that are quite deprived, and there is working class neighborhoods. On the other hand, there is more residential neighborhoods. So we try to capture people in both of those neighborhoods. And one of the most popular neighborhoods are Grand Dakar and Pekin. And compared to, for instance, Mermoz, Sacré-Cœur, and Almadies, which are considered as very, very upper scale neighborhood. The idea is that actually when we interview people in these neighborhoods, the idea is to interview people that actually come from other rural areas and then have settled in these neighborhoods in Dakar, and to ask them about the experience living in the city and what are the projects in the future. And some of the interview came from the Senegal River Valley. I think Mohamedou will introduce more this region afterwards, to present to more what this is about. And the Grand Nat Bassin, which is actually known for producing, how do we call it, peanuts. But because of a lot of history related to climate change, there is a lot of decline in production of peanuts. So we actually try to capture also many professions such as bricklayers, people working in construction services, drivers, gardeners, etc. So we try to actually diversify the number of people, but also the time of arrival, as I precised earlier. We did, next to the 30 interviews with migrants, we did actually 5 key expert interviews where actually we looked at people that are in academia or in government position, ministry, or in international organization that actually had experience with dealing with migration issues in Senegal. Yes, Stefano. And I think I will quickly present some of the issues that we have had. There were actually issues with, for instance, you have to remember that this interview was done during the corona, and some people actually initially agreed to do interviews, but then they canceled and they didn't give consents. And compared to men, women were less accessible for interviews. So that's why we have actually a slight imbalance between men and women in the interview conducted. So there was also difficulties emerging in trying to interview the expert working in the borders and security service. So for instance, because of an issue with, they often don't have you have the feeling that they don't have the freedom to speak freely about the topic because of some kind of governmental reserve that they have to have when they're employed by the state. There was also in 2020 the mass protests in a riot occurring against the arrest of one of the biggest opposition leader in Senegal that actually have been happening during the interview, and actually it temporarily prevented the work to continue during this period. But apart from these methodological challenges, our team in Senegal was able to actually conduct the interview. I would leave the floor to Mohamedou, and he will present a little bit about Senegal. Yeah. Thank you. Mohamedou? Mohamedou? Mohamedou Sall?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah.
You hear me, Lansine?
Yeah, we can
You
hear
me?
you. Yeah.
Lansine?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I must okay, let me present my slide. Madame Kia, je présente ça rapidement, après on se reprend, d'accord? Vous êtes
I can shift the slide, Mamadou, if it's fine for you, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Je suis à votre disposition. Hein?
Oui, vous êtes là.
Là, je suis venue pour travailler.
Oui, on se reprend.
Si vous souhaitez que j'attends encore, je peux attendre.
Oui, je présente juste ça.
D'accord, vous finissez à quelle heure?
D'ici peut-être. Si c'est compliqué, vous. Okay. Excuse me, I was in discussion with my administrative and financial staff. I am Professor Muhammad Sal, and I am the director of I'm a demographer, and I'm a director of the population, namely called Institute for Training and Research in Population Development and Health Reproduction. And I was a consultant in charge of Senegal cases. So I will present you quickly the specific context of Senegal related to the demographic, political, environmental, and social cultural context. So, what we want to know about the demographic context of Senegal demographic context is as other countries in Africa.
The internet is not good. Can you hear him?
Countries in Africa, it means that some years on fertility and mortality. And this both and rates to an increase of population, and specifically in the increase of young people. So the right now we can consider that around 60% of the Senegal population is less than 25. It means that the Senegal population is very young. So this is an important fact to consider if you want to analyze the drivers of migration in Senegal, because due to this fact, the stock of young people who want to have the possibility to migrate is very important. So this demographic transition is a particular fact related to migration. Another fact which is in the interface of demography and sociology is that most of these young people, due to the hard economic conditions of the country, these young people didn't have a formal employment. It means that many of them work in the informal sector. So they, on the economic side, they are very weak. And they still be in their household with their parents, and what we call here pantuflat, it means that they live in their parent household, and they are in a situation to be assisted. Considering the Senegal situation, it's a shameful situation. So this can be additional motivation for these young people to migrate. Also, the environmental context is also very important, because from all of you has learned about the drought, particularly in the middle of 1970. We had a very important drought that lead many people to migrate from rural areas to the urban areas, especially to Dakar, and from Dakar to abroad. You must just consider that before 1980, there is no need for a visa to go to France. So these people, many of Senegalese family in some localities in France. If you want to know the history of the migration, this history is linked to this drought. If you take people who live in Mantes-la-Jolie, in Ivry, in Muro, in the Havre town, all these population are their migration is linked to this drought. You must also consider that climate change, which explain the decline of rainfall in the country, and it is shown here by this card. In green you have the estimation of rainfall, and if you consider the free maps, you see that along the time the decline, or we have a decline of rainfall, and the decline of rainfall is also associated with poor condition of farming, and these poor condition of farming lead to an economic weakness of rural household. So it explains also this migration from rural areas. Here in the map, in the fourth map, you have this migration from some region toward generally Dakar and also Touba. This is the environmental context of the migration. To summarize, Senegal country is very is deeply rooted in economic farming. So if the climatic condition are not good, it will have an impact of the household economy, and this is also a driver for migration. Here you have always the economic context that from the independence to now, with critical critical years, from independence to 1919, you have this rural migration from rural areas to Dakar, and in the middle of 1996, 17, we have this growth, which is a critical point in the migration context. So, it is in this period where many people from rural areas left these rural areas and came to Dakar, and from Dakar, some of them migrated abroad. Also, we have the devaluation of franc CFA, which lead to a hardship of living conditions, another also driver of migration. We have also always in the context, we have the political aspect. You must consider Senegal as the single country with Cape Verde Island that never faced a military coup. And this is very important. It showed that Senegal is a very stable country. Another aspect to consider is that democracy progress is also associated with a press freedom and a wide access to information coming from abroad that gives the possibility to Senegalese people to know about what is happening abroad, what is the opportunities in the field of adventure and migration. And this freedom of press and this wide access to information must be also considered as a firm, as a strong driver of migration. We must also consider, it's the last aspect, we must also consider a formal convention and agreement with European countries, like Frontex is a kind of agreement involving security forces like naval forces, military police, what we call gendarmerie here, to control irregular migration. But these convention and agreement, they produce side effects or opposite effect, in a sense that they arouse envy to live. It is about the political context. The last aspect is the social cultural aspect context. To consider the specific case of Senegal, a context in which migrating and going for adventure is well perceived among the population. As I wrote it here, adventure and migration are associated with Dolce Vita. Some of the former religious leader, which called El Ajamar, he said that people of Futa go for another places if you want to enjoy your life. Onon Futa Kobe Pere Ndalgam. If you want to know to enjoy your life, yeah, you must leave. We can also use another semiology of Wolof people who say that it means that someone who doesn't migrate will never know nice places. A second aspect of social culture is the fact that living for adventure is a brand for brave men. People, Tukulur people, Pular people, used to say that Daniel wala yanani wudun, it means that you have to success or to have remote burial. It means that, yeah, you must go for adventure. And there is just two possibilities. If you must go for adventure, but in adventure you have the success, otherwise you will die there. It shows also the what we call the jail into brackets of those people who migrate, in a sense that if they migrate, if they doesn't succeed there, they will not come back. Another aspect is socio-demographic consideration, last polygamy as a hidden driver of migration. You take two brothers, they have the different mothers. If one of them migrates and got a success and get a success, automatically the second will have to do the same. Otherwise, his mother will be in a shameful situation in the household. And this is a strong will to succeed for himself, for parents and relatives. Yeah, I have just two last slide. In this slide, I want just to emphasize the image of successful migrant, the fact that the image of successful migrant, which has progressively replaced the image of civil servant like teachers, nurses, who during the independence years was considered as the incarnation of success in modernity. This image of civil servants as image icon of modernity and success was replaced now by the image of successful migrant who in a sense that migration is associated with kick and strong wealth. Most of Senegal, it is very important. Almost most of Senegalese migrate within Africa, and this doesn't not concern only Senegal, but also countries. 41% of the total of the Senegalese immigrants are in Europe. Here we pointed out key change of Senegalese international migrant occurred in the second decade of 2000. Migrant profile and category of migrant highly diversified. Migration affects all sectors of the working population. It means that you will see some teachers who leave their office and try to go for migration. You will have some who work in the health system who will leave their job and try to go to migration, expecting having more than they have now in their job. The young people from working class peripheral urban are the most concerned. Feminization of the migration is an important fact observed, specifically for some destinations like Italy, Spain, and Portugal, and also in United States of America. The feminization of migration specifically concern these countries. Informalization of migration and increasingly from peripheral and rural areas. also, we must consider migration as outcome of fragmented trajectories taking place in different spaces in time. What we want just to point out here is considering the specific region and at special time, migration is not the same. Also, in long stays and settled migrations, they have not the same aspiration, the same motivation, and the same approach while having a migration project and while implementing this migration project. Especially among young generation living in the neighborhoods of Dakar, commuting practice from rural to urban areas rather than permanent settlement characterize recent movement. Circular migration patterns respond also the progressive saturation of Dakar labor market and the increased informalization of migration trajectories. What a strong indicator of increased informalization of migration trajectories is shown by the increasing of illegal migration. This morning, in the new papers, they talk about these illegal migration whom the boat sank in the Atlantic Sea. The last thing is about peripheral areas of the country, as always, more places of undocumented migrants. We must also note that even if Dakar and coastal points like Kayar, like Caravan in Casamance, like Saint-Louis, are some departure points for illegal migration. We have also in the hinterland places like Kaolack as points of departure for illegal migration. But these aspects of departure points is not very documented. Yes, it is what I wanted to present here, and thank you for listening.
Stefano, the floor is yours. Stefano will quickly introduce the result, present our results. Stefano.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to conclude the contextualization that Mamadou has done and on our research focus, actually mainly why we, instead of, even if the migration, as he said, is changing in Senegal, we decided to focus our research in Dakar because, as we see from this map that we have already shown, migration becomes always more complex, and despite that, is always increased in the capital since the 70s. And as we see from this data, actually, as you see, for 43% of an internal migration, are still concentrated in the capital, and actually is really becoming a hub of internal and international migration, where many things are happening. And as we see from this image, since the 80s, the urban development of Dakar has led the city to become even more a place that have factor of attraction, but also aspect that challenge the possibility to settle there and to see there as a place to move forward. So very briefly, I will sketch here some points that are related to to more attractive aspect of the city that is historically was related to the role of Murid Brotherhood that provide support to migrants that want to settle in the city. And at the same time, there was the visual influence, material influence of returnees coming from, that was coming back to the village and attract people to go to the capital city. At the same time, more recently, Dakar became a regional hub for many international organizations, so increasing the possibility of finding work in tertiary sector. But at the same time, the recent growing Chinese investment in the city lead also to somehow allow people to assess certain commodities that before, because of the different prices that were actually before was not allowed to them. So somehow this new import of cheap commodities somehow democratized the consumption of Western lifestyles commodities that was generally reserved to foreigners. At the same time, there are challenges to the movement to Dakar, and mainly are tied to the new neoliberal reforms of the last two presidencies that lead to a destructuration of the labor market and therefore, and at the same time, to the structuration of the infrastructure of solidarity among people. And that leads on one side to increase the informal labor market, but at the same time, to increase the competition among people to find jobs. And that has been even more increased by the fact that actually Senegal, as other country, as a country that experienced a phenomenon of urbanization, but without a strong industrialization. And so that's led actually to a growing informal working sector. If we go to our, sketch some of our results related to why people actually move from their place of origin to Dakar, according to the different, as Lancine said, we mainly focus on different time of arrival of people to the city. Overall, we have observed how actually mainly economic and sociocultural motivation are mentioned by most of the people. Mainly, as we see also from this quotation, we can mainly sketch some main factor, economic factor, that are related to the unbalanced development within the capital and the region, internal region, where actually agriculture is still not a concrete alternative for stable long-term project, actually. And so it's this economic hardship that actually lead people to find difficult even to ensure the basic needs for their family, that leads people to move. And so this, in a way, suggested also that they didn't move necessarily to Dakar to look for a better place or better opportunities, but to reach and to get the possibility to have a decent living for them and the family. And this aspect actually overlap with some sociocultural factors that are mainly related, as we see from this quotation, mainly to the lack of opportunity for personal development, and on one side, and on the other side to reach the family, the social expectation, so related to the relation with the kin members. And at the same time, as suggested from the last quotation that mentioned the role of the local culture, the ethnic, belonging to the ethnic group, where in certain case, migration is ingrained in the society. So there is a culture of migration. There's a mobility somehow ingrained in the daily life of the people. So even moving to Dakar or other places is not an exception, but is something that is part of the organization of the daily life. And but interesting difference comes out if we look at between the settlers and who come more recently. If we look at how the different categories look at and their social perception on their home place and Dakar. And if we focus on the settled migrant, the more longer stayers, we could see how among them actually they were mainly the lack of basic educational opportunities that lead them to actually move to Dakar, along with the perception of being trapped somehow in a situation where actually not only there was no primary school, middle school, but there was the idea that remaining in the home place means having possibility to learning Quran or practice only agriculture, not having possibility to do other activities. And this is, as I said, goes along with a different perception of Dakar as on one side, going to Dakar is like a symbolic, becomes a symbolic status as in terms of personal and cultural advancement. And we see how it's very interesting how the people frame this. He said this, one of these, our interviewer talked about, explain how staying in the village actually it's difficult to become intelligent, to say smart, because you cannot know the hardship of life. But going to Dakar is a way not only to find possibilities, but to improve and become open-minded. So somehow there was not just economic advancement. And at the same time, as it generally happened, was really considered as a radical change. And we see Dakar was really considered is completely different from old Senegal and a world apart. So in this sense, the movement from the transition from rural life to urban area was not simply a geographical internal movement, but really a radical change, cultural radical change. But if we turn to the who arrived more recently, we can observe differences because some years later there were much more possibility of basic education, and in fact the main drivers to move were at least from what our interview say to us was mainly the absence of to pursue higher education, so to have possibility to undertake vocational training or in different fields that were not just related to agriculture, and so training and higher education was very different drivers. And if we turn to how the people express to us the intention, the propensity or not to migrate further abroad, we have see how actually the the different the different time of arrival to the city somehow, and the different shape the different profession to move further or not. So overall, we actually observe some major partners that are mainly that people that were settled in Dakar since more time were actually initially, at least, mainly keen to remain in the city. On the other hand, the majority talks us about the interest to go further abroad, and interestingly, among the newcomers, so the youngsters that comes to Dakar in the last 5 years, the interest to go abroad was actually also goes in parallel with the possibility to go back to their place, with an idea that, as we will see, to stay mobile, not to get stuck in one place. So at least to find always a way to I'm sorry, I'm just stopped. And so if we go more in, as I said, among settled migrants, Dakar was not conceived as an intermediate, a stepping stone to go abroad, but actually the intention to go abroad was only considered to a limited extent, really, because initially there was a lot of hopes in the possibility to stay there, and from this quotation we can actually also get how among them what we perceive is that even if there was less knowledge about the city, so it was much, as I say, the radical change, the changes between hometown and Dakar. So less information, but much more clear plan of what they want to achieve. And on the other hand, as we will see, the newcomers were much more aware, also because of an historical decade of people coming back to home place and sharing information. They were much more knowledgeable about what we're getting, but with no really clear migratory plan. As we see here, actually, even as I said, among settled migrants, much more recently, the propensity to go abroad grow because of the as I mentioned before, the challenge of the city, the increasing competition and the increasing competition for job within the city due to the saturation of the labor market. So, as I said, if we turn to the newcomers, for them, since the beginning, Dakar was always considered as a stopover to reach Europe. So just a place to acquire knowledge, establish relations, and especially earn money to go abroad. And it's really clear from especially this first quotation when this person was telling us going to Dakar is nothing more than a beginning of a journey. So it's something that is means it's just a step for a journey that is not clear what it brings, but that it's really just a moment, especially because of the awareness of the difficulty to live there, and this difficulty is really is, as I said, is linked to the impossibility to achieve personal projects that, especially to, in many cases, to increase their education or their working, or to work or to find job in new field of activities. And I just actually add this quotation that is actually an anthropologist, Anneke Newman, that I believe it's, in my opinion, aptly describe how the opinion and feeling expressed by the informant when they find this disappointment. And she said, school in the village. Actually, she also looked at the train in a large number of people for well-paid formal sector jobs which simply do not exist or which are not accessible in Dakar as well. So, and that's what actually lead the new youngster to go abroad. But at the same time, as I said, we observe how because of most of them are landowners actually, and most of them, they were telling us that they were owning land, family land, and especially because they were always more aware of the difficulties of getting visa and to go abroad due to also the externalization of EU policies. Actually, they conceive the possibility to remain in the country and to go back to the land, even if, again, this possibility is seen not without challenge, because of, especially for two aspects that they underline, that were related to the lack of proper means to cultivate, to work the land, but at the same time, more interestingly, to the different interest between generations. So the power relation between different generations within the family that leads to have difficulties to actually to get responsibility and to give, to shape in their own way how to deal with their properties. And finally, just two further aspects that we found particularly interesting as in trying to explore the aspiration and motivation to migrate abroad and within the country, where that actually, especially when we look at the motivation to go abroad and we ask about that, we perceive that among most of the people, there were a mismatch, we say, between aspiration and migration. So most of them, even if they always said we were interested and we would even go abroad the day after, they don't really seem to be engaged on the attempt to collect information or necessary documents to actually concretely undertake migration. So it seems rather that migration to go abroad is the outcome, as we said, of fortuities or sudden chance. So it's not a planned project, but rather something that it could be that could happen according to sudden possibilities. And together with that, actually, I think it's really like it goes in parallel, the idea that among most of the people we interviewed, they didn't really had a specific interest in one places or another places, but actually as we said, the destination places was not a result of preferential choices, but rather of an evaluation of the availability of network of relation that they have within the country and abroad. So actually, as also this quotation underline, the importance of the network of relation actually shape where the people could end up, and the degree of availability, and so again, there's no real clear migration project as could have been 2 decades ago. And just to wrap up very quickly, if I have still some minutes, I just want to go through the main conclusion that we draw from our research. As Mamadou said, there has been a feminization of migration that actually does not only, that leads actually to transformation within the country, and also in how the women perceive the organization of domesticity in Senegal. And it's interesting also to see how most of them were more prone to actually move internally, not necessarily abroad. At the same time, we didn't go in depth, but education is still a thorny issue because it's not real. It's not still clear the relation between the degree of the educational level and the propensity actually to emigrate internationally. On the other hand, as I said, what this propensity of youngsters to go back to the land, that is something interesting and new from our point of view, that that goes along another aspect, that is this greatly discussed link between migration and environmental change. So actually during our interview, the environmental changes were not mentioned and perceived as a direct factor for migration, and even because in many cases environmental change, when was considered as relevant, did not really necessarily lead to a complete abandonment of their land or territories, or to international migration, but rather to internal mobility. Because who perceive generally to be affected by environmental aspect, that imply to environmental aspect the decision to move, actually are people that do not necessarily have greater resources to go abroad, to migrate internationally. And just very quickly, actually, as we see, Dakar emerged as an ambivalent urban experience. So not just, as we suppose at the beginning, a stepping stone for migration, but also in many cases, especially among newcomers, becomes a long-standing destination with no voluntary choices. So actually is becoming a choice by default rather than by a real intent. And I will see the trajectory of people are really fragmented, are not, and could change along the time according to how the context where they live. This is what I was mentioning right now. And this fragmentation lead actually to different way of react. As Mamadou said, already mentioned, to search for alternative routes to go to Europe in our case, or to a progressive informalization of migration. So to rely on informal network, not necessarily legal, but informal and not institutional. And actually, one of the key growing role that is in this informal way of planning their trip is to rely on returnees and social media. And this is really something that is becoming, their influence was already very important, but we believe during the last years, it becomes even more central. And Yeah, I said about the mismatch between aspiration and act of migration. And as I said, the importance of the networks among people who the network in shaping their motivation to live or not. And this, of course, leaves a lot of empty space for further research. For us, it seems to us mainly to conclude that migrant aspiration, it seems to tell us not so much of the intention of people to migrate elsewhere, but rather of their desire to stay. So their narratives about migration seems to tell us much more about their wish to stay and how they perceive and they envisage their possibility to stay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Stefano. We have a very interesting presentation. I don't have much time for Q&A, but we have a couple of questions already emerging, and also some persons such as Shepherd Mutsawara, who said that he wanted to ask questions live. So please turn on your mic and video if you want to do that now.
Thank you, panel, for such interesting presentations. I think the story of Dakar is the same story of Harare, it's the same story of Maputo, it's the same story of Windhoek. It is the same narrative in the sub-Saharan Africa. And I have a question to Lansing Diop, who says there seem to be an intertwined transformation of factors, especially linked to environment, that makes people then move. Is it time that we seriously call for climate refugees as a proper name for people who seem to have been pushed off from their environment, and they seek some form of movement, either from one village in Senegal to Dakar, or from Dakar to abroad? And Mahamadou, you did talk of structural adjustment programs and how they've affected not only Dakar, but also it seems it has been a template for most African countries who adopted economic policies that were not in sync with the economic climate in Africa. And this has caused a lot of movements out of not only regional areas within Africa, but also out of the continent to Europe. And when those people arrive in Europe, especially here in Poland, where I'm also staying, they are not seen as people in need of international protection, but just economic migrants trying to jump the queue. Is it also not time, Mahamadou, to have a new term of refugees called economic refugees? And then also, Stefano, thank you so much for the last part of the presentation. You talked of migration as a feasible and planned project in Dakar, and that some are saying it's rather much better to die than wait for poverty to come and affect you while you're in Dakar. But there seem to be this difficulty in getting visas to move out of the country if they want to be documented migrants. Do you feel that the global mobility infrastructure is not the same for global South citizens as compared to global North citizens? It's easy for a Polish citizen to go to Dakar. It's difficult for a Senegalese to come here to Poland. There has to be a lot of documentation. So is it not time for the global mobility infrastructure to be leveled so that movement of people is easier than it is as of now? Thank you.
Lansile, my suggestion is that we will add a couple of more questions and then give you time for answers. So there is, for example, question from Fabien Cotier, who is asking you the following question. You mentioned during the presentation the seasonal migration, that seasonal migration was on the rise. Would it be possible to know more about the timing and factors driving seasonal migration? Does seasonal migration take place during periods when labor is scarce in rural areas, or is it unrelated to agricultural conditions? So this question is from Fabienne. Agnieszka, could you read the question which was appeared earlier? Fabienne, do you want to add something? Yeah, I see you that you switched on your video.
Yeah, no, exactly. This
okay.
was my question, yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you for this.
Thanks.
This is to whom, this question? To which speaker? To any who wants to pick it up. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Agnieszka?
Okay, so there's one more question, one by Alex de Sherbinin, who compliments you on the results, as do I, actually. And he says, I'm sensing this reluctance to return to the village. And he thinks it's because of the constraints on roles within the village. The mention of studying the Quran also points to the limitations young people experience. So this hostile living environment drives many migrants as much as economic rationales, and with few prospects in Dakar, the only real choice seems to be to move onward. Is that a correct interpretation? And I also have a question, and specifically to Stefano. I would like to ask about the Italian context. With the new government in Italy, yes, headed by Giorgia Meloni, do you think there is going to be any major change to the immigration policy, to the Italian reception system, or is it going to stay just in a discursive area as a political self-presentation?
I would like to also add one more question concerning you presented different types of migration. On the photos, we could also see Confucius Institute, China, Confucius Institute.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
China acts as a very important actor in sub-Saharan Africa in general, West Africa in particular. And one of the important elements of the Chinese sort of development policies is also attracting students to China. There's over 80,000 sub-Saharan Africans who are studying at Chinese universities. I was wondering to what extent China is important in Senegal when it comes to as a place of destination, whether this has emerged in your research, because in my research in Northern Africa, in Tunisia, Egypt, it hardly exists. So it's a kind of a new thing for me. And to what extent this is a competition to, for example, educational migration to Europe, and how important is Erasmus? Erasmus is a very important in some countries as a new platform for educational migration. To what extent this is the case of Senegal? And if so, this is when it's formal sort of leg, and when it comes to informal leg, I wanted you to tell us a little bit more on how popular is this? Like, what percentage of general outflow from Senegal would be through the informal channels, and what would be the informal route, the most popular in the current sort of situation? Libya used to be an important sort of transition country in the past. I wonder how is it now? Thank you. Is there any other question from the audience? If not, for the moment, you have quite a few questions to address, so you can start to do so. And please try to be relatively brief, so as we could. not take too much more time.
So we will try to be brief. Stefano, Mohamedou is still here or not? Mohamedou?
Seems to be here.
Okay. I would quickly answer to the question that were addressed particularly to me by Shepherd, our friend Shepherd. If I remember, you were talking about climate migrants, whether actually it's a new, we could talk about phenomenon of climate migrants when it comes to sub-Saharan Africa. In a way, I agree that actually there are a lot of migrants that are actually driven by climate change, but I am very skeptical when it comes to labeling migrants, some group of migrants, climate migrants, for the reason that actually, if you look at some ethnic group in Senegal, such as the Pular ethnic group, Mohamedou is aware of it, the Pearls, they're actually nomads. So which means that they actually, for centuries, they used to go from a point of water to another one to migrate during the season in order to feed the cattle. And they know actually the point of water. So which means that they didn't have a one point to settle. They had several points to settle during those periods. So which means that those people actually have lived for centuries adapting to the need for the cattle in terms of point of waters in some arid areas. So, but what is actually interesting in the new area, and that's why I am a bit skeptical, is that climate change may be the, I don't know, it may be just the push that push people in the final, how do we call it? The final, how do we call it? So that push people into migrating, but it has to be mixed with different factors, such as the socio-cultural factors that Mohamedou has been talking about, like that it's actually the socio-cultural mixed with economic factors. Because for a young person, it's not only about feeding their family, because most people actually don't migrate because they don't have food to eat. Most people migrate because they want to become somebody in life, in their life, and to be able to marry, to have a wife, to have a house. Because when you're a young person and then all your the people from the same age group, they marry, they have a wife, it's like a social death, because it seems like you're not a very dignified member of the society. And therefore, actually, climate change might be just a triggering factor, but there are more deep social cultural factors and economic factors that are attached to migration. That's why I'm a bit skeptical about calling climate migrants, right? I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not sure I had other questions. I will give my other colleagues the floor. If there is another question that I forgot that will address to me, please remind me.
I will try to give some hints of some. I imagine on seasonal migration, Mamadou is the expert on this, so I'll leave it to him. And very briefly, as I also actually wrote in the chat, I mean, I fully agree with what Alex, the Serbian, suggests. Actually, it's true that there's other constraints to go back, and as I said, also intergenerational conflict, and so a conflict that relates to the different perspective and different way of seeing the future and the context where the people live that makes difficulties. And if it goes also to a gender dimension, I think this is another aspect. So I agree with what he was writing, that of course is not only to the limited to the view of being limited to study Quran, but it's very complex and many reasons for not going back, or at least not to see possibility to do something if they go back. And I'm curious to see as well where it's going to go, the new Italian government, But okay, most of the people that are part of this government will share an idea of try to establish a naval blockade. This is something that is going on the issue in the discussion for a lot, but I think I don't want to say a lot about that, especially because we always have to remind the thing that Italy is always within the framework of EU policies and EU framework. So, and there will be a lot of strong relation with the previous government more than what is perceived. So I don't see. I think it would be there are other. Actually, migration was not even a topic during the electoral period. Was surprisingly so. Perhaps even by this voluntary, but I don't think there will be bigger change on that. And I think also on informalization of roots, Mamadou could say things because he undertake research also in other area of Senegal, and is really an expert on that. What I could just say is that I believe that the issue, this changing is also growing. And what I notice is also because actually the externalization of EU policies that we talk about are affecting also previous policy framework within Western Africa, for example. And I'm referring to, for example, the protocol of free movement of people within ECOWAS. And actually, the externalization of policies of the EU, that means bilateral agreement with some of the countries of ECOWAS, is leading to actually affect this free movement of historical from the 70s of people within country in Western Africa. And that's actually something that is affecting also the possibility of people to move to other countries within Western Africa because of EU. So what seems interesting right now is this overlapping of EU externalization policies and the historical protocol of free movement that were settled in Western Africa and in ECOWAS especially. This is affecting the possibility of people to find their way. And perhaps I stop here to let Mamadou also say something that...
Thank you very much, Stefano. Thank you all for your interest in our presentation. But it will be, the question asked to me in French, so I will be back in English to Steph. L'enseignant, est-ce que tu peux expliquer un peu les quelques questions qu'on m'a posées, et spécialement, il y a une question qui a été posée concernant le Coran, l'éducation du Coran en lien avec la migration. L'enseignant?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm muted. I forgot to unmute myself. Mohamedou, je pense, en tout cas, si j'ai compris la question, c'est comment le fait que il y a de la migration liée à l'étude du Coran, comment ces gens-là se sédentarisent dans des endroits et comment l'étude du Coran, je sais pas, I'm not 100% sure. Who asked the question? Can you repeat your question, please? Who asked the question about the Quran? Hello? Is it Agnieszka?
Okay, I think it was a question by Alex. Yes.
Alex, okay.
And he's not with us anymore.
Okay, because I kind of get that he wanted to know whether this migration related to studying the Quran. But as far as I understand, Mohamedou, this migration is related to children of younger age, and then they end up settling in. For instance, I know that most of them, the Taliban, which are the kids that actually study the Quran and go in the street because that's part of the education. They are a lot that come from Guinea, so they're not even Senegalese. So there is this kind of regional migration that are related to the study of Quran. Mohamedou, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
I think these last years we face a kind of migration, but it is a migration which most concern young people. It is young people brought from Guinea Conakry or Guinea Bissau, from Guinea Bissau, and there is some what we call some marabout, some religious leaders who brought them from this country in order to bring them in Senegal. But this migration is first, I don't say that it's an illegal migration because we are in the ECOWAS space, but it's a kind of illegal migration in a sense that probably it's a kind of traffic for these young people. When they come here, you have an they send them into street to search for money in order to bring it to the marabout. But in relation with international migration, there is no relation between this migration and international migration. And if you want to see the relation between Quranic education and migration, I don't see such relation, especially between Senegal and European countries. Indeed, we can have some people who did Islamic studies, and after decided when they have the opportunity to migrate, but it's not really the level, the type of education and Quranic education and international migration. No. Yeah. Est-ce qu'il y avait une autre question?
Yes, there is. Yeah. In summary, there is not enough study to actually show the link between Quranic education and international migration. Of course, regionally, like from other regions to Senegal. However, one question I think Mohamedou was about China. And okay, first about factor influencing seasonal migration. So this term Noran and Navetan, I think it was it Fabien or I'm not sure. Fabien, are you here?
Yeah, Mamadou, I share the question in your chat. Could you read it?
My question was about the rural urban migration. I did not ask a question about China.
No, yeah, that's what I said. That factor influences seasonal migration.
Okay, yeah, correct. Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Mohamedou, what are the factors influencing seasonal migration? Noran and Navetan, you know. Hello?
Les facteurs qui influencent ça?
La migration saisonnière, tu sais, le Noran et le Navetan.
Il voudrait savoir de plus sur les
facteurs qui influencent la migration saisonnière. I would quickly give my sense, but Mohamedou could start if you want.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk, Mohamedou?
Yeah, en fait, I can say that seasonally migration is you know, if you want to understand this kind of migration, you must consider the period before the independence. What I want to mean is that in one time, the colonial power, it means the French, decided that the tax wouldn't be paid in what we call nature. It means that in the past, the autochthone population, the local population, had the possibility after the crop period to pay the tax, les impôts, to colonial power, to France, by millet, by maize, by maize corn, by all those periods, peanuts. But in the past, they decided to they informed that they will not from this point from this time to accept a payment in nature. They decided that tax might be paid in currency. So it's the first explanation of seasonal migration, especially in northern Senegal. To get money, you must go to the groundnut basin to work to work on groundnut, on peanuts field, and to get money, so you will be able to pay the tax. And it is the first explanation of migration from rural areas to another rural areas, especially groundnut basin, or from rural areas to the town. The second aspect is, and we can consider the example of northern Senegal. When I was a child, you have always some people living in the hinterland of Matam, which is the biggest town in the northern Senegal. Those people, before a time of migration toward Europe, all the rural areas, people from rural areas, when it is the period of dry season, they used to leave their places and to come to the town, because it's they doing a little job for young woman doing domestic work. Because in the rural areas, before this time of migration, there was no opportunity. And this you have some people who come who migrate from the rural areas to the most close town. You have also people who migrate from the rural areas to more remote towns, like the big town in the western part of the country, yes, Saint-Louis and Dakar, and Saint-Louis, and finally this this has been a kind of model, and this model is always functional. It means that it's always functional, but comment je vais dire, c'est toujours fonctionnel.
Yeah, it's a model that is still relevant today. because it's
More
linked to the seasons.
This model is always
I think to add to what Mohammed is saying.
Yes.
And we have the terms Noran and Navetan. Basically, Noran is when the season is called the dry season, and Navetan in Senegal is called the rainy season, the wet season. And the wet season, it lasts more or less, on average, 3 months. It lasts a little bit more in the south of the country, but in the northern part of the country, it doesn't exceed more than 3 months. And during this season, the schools are closed, and the people actually that were working in Dakar during the dry season, because they want to earn money, because there is no paid labor in the rural areas, they return to help their parents to grow crops in the land. And once they finish the harvesting, they can return to the city again. So there is this kind of seasonal migration that is still relevant nowadays. And it's actually, the socio-cultural framing of Senegal is all linked to these 2 seasons. Even the school holidays, it's 3 months, and it's framed around this season where actually even children that are studying or kids that are at school, they can have their parents during harvest. And that's what Mohammed is saying, is that this kind of shaping both migration, but also everything that's organized around school and work, it's actually shaped around these seasons that are very important for rural, for farming, because we have still subsistence farming with not a lot of machineries that are still relying on heavy labor and less and very, very inefficient in terms of how much you can get from growing crops. I think we can move from that topic to maybe brush off a little bit about somebody who was talking about China. Is it Conrad?
Yes, it was
very briefly. You could guys just tackle this regular, educational, and irregular, and then to end.
At least I'm not gonna say a lot of things about it because I'm not an expert. But from what I have been at least following what is going on in Senegal right now, to an extent, the Chinese government actually, because I know a colleague of mine, I used to study with him, he got a scholarship from the Chinese government to do his PhD in China. So there is actually a scholarship that are initiated by the Chinese government for some Senegalese students, but it's not to the extent that it's like cause massive migration for education to China, because the first default choice for Senegalese students, it's not to go to China because of language barriers. They would naturally, I think in terms of competition for European countries, Canada is a real competitor, because it's like if you ask a lot of Senegalese students if they would choose between Europe and Canada, they would technically choose Canada, because there is also, like in Quebec, they speak French. So there is this language pipeline that actually guide the choice of the country of education. However, I think that there is also some program in Japan where some Senegalese are given scholarship to study in Japan. So the scholarship for Senegalese student that goes and study in China and Japan or these countries are actually mostly linked to some scholarship that are helping the students be able to study there. However, for France and other countries, actually you have a lot of students that go with that scholarship because it's much easier to find their way in the labor market because they speak the same language, and it's countries that are traditionally where Senegalese go to study. I don't know if it's what I'm saying answer to your question. In terms of informal channels, what would be what would look like in the future? Actually, it's hard to tell because, for instance, recently when we started the project, one thing that happened is that because of the decline in terms of fishing, how do you call it? A lot of fishermen in Senegal have a decline in terms of how much they can catch, because they still go to these small traditional boats and go in the sea, and it's harder and harder to catch fish, and it's harder to compete with how do you call it, these boats from Russia, from Europe, and also from China, because they can catch so many fish that it's actually very difficult for these local fishermen to compete. So which actually create demand in fish in local market, which affect the price of fish. However, what happens in this circumstance is that some of these fishermen that rely only on their activity, they actually turn towards migration because it's an easy way to, I mean, they don't migrate themselves often. It's just that they take people from Senegal to Spain because you have people paying like 2,000, 3,000 euro to just cross from some of the coast of Senegal to Spain. So this is something that is one economic decline in terms of fishing. It's affecting migration in a very tangible way. There was a lot of death recently related to that. So it's actually, that is why it's actually difficult to predict, because any economic hardship could translate into massive migration in that regard. That's at least, yeah. So is there any question that we have forgot, Stefano? Yeah. Did we forget something? Did we not cover any something, Stefano?
No, I don't think so.
So I think we got all the answers. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining the seminar, to all the guests for staying with us, for you guys presenting your research and super interesting and giving answers to all the questions. If there are any questions that remained, please communicate directly with Lancine, Stefano, or Mamadou. I'm sure you'll be more than happy to answer any remaining questions. Anyway, I'll see you in a couple of days, so I'll ask all the remaining questions to you directly.
No, you won't see me. He won't see me.
Thank you once again.
Thank you
for your time. Thank you, Agnieszka, for
Thank
co-moderating. Mamadou for joining us from Senegal. And others. Have a nice afternoon and evening.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Goodbye.